Сейчас у нас выступает следующий спикер, SAHER SIDHOM, основатель компании Hackmasters, и он расскажет нам про коллаборации. Захер, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me well? Yes? Good. It might be easier if you come forward, so people coming in just fill in the front seats, because I think there's a little bit of an echo. Right. First thing I'm about to say is please ignore everything I'm about to say. Ignore everything you're about to see. So I started the company with Ina, who's just over there, about 3.5 years ago in London. We were interested in doing things differently. We did not want to create another agency. We did not want to create another design studio or anything like that. We wanted to do something a little bit different. So one of the big things that I realized, in order to build the new types of products and services that you will see in the future, you cannot possibly do them with the same people you have. We used to work for a really big company. We had 450 people in the building, and we couldn't use any of them to do the new things that we wanted to do. So it's quite important for us to build a new model whereby we have access to just about any skill or any talent anywhere in the world. So we built a database of about 3,000 people, and we also built our own search engine for identifying data scientists around the world. And in that search engine, we have about 50,000 people. So if you think about it, when you are working at that level, so these are our teams, our database, and our kind of search engine. When we're working with, we work with governments. We work with 3 different governments. We work with big consultancies. We work with ad agencies. We work with small startups, big brands, all of these types of things. And quite a lot, the types of challenges that we get are so big and so complex that you cannot possibly solve them with the same type of person. So we go and find world-class experts to come and work on these things. We have 2 levels of experts. We have these types of experts who are quite senior, quite experienced. The guy on the bottom left is the designer of the Japanese bullet train. The lady in the middle, she's an astronaut and a CEO of a spaceport where you can build spaceships. And the lady on the right is an MIT professor who specializes in something called self-assembly architecture, which is basically buildings that build themselves. So for our projects, when you're looking for something really specific, such as new types of architecture or new types of mobility or new types of automation, you're going to have to work with the leading cutting edge people to do that. Needless to say, although Ina and I are absolutely amazing, alone we're not enough. We have to get these people in. So we engage with these types of people, and in our database we have all of these people that we worked with. But that's not enough. That's only step 1. Our ambition as a company is to be 100% distributed autonomous network. Allow me to explain. We are currently trying to automate all our processes within the company to the point whereby humans can only do human things. Anything that could be outsourced to a machine, anything that could be automated, we will do so. From the research, the way that we do research, to the way that we analyze. We even analyze people's code in order to work out whether they're good or not. So we go on GitHub and we look at kind of their code and we analyze it to work out whether they're good or not. But the idea here is that ultimately, in about 10 years' time, our dream or our vision is that Hackmasters becomes a piece of software that you download to solve your problems. And we also have another company called Venture Masters, and this is where we make our own investments. And one of the early investments that we're making is in identifying the right partners for brands, so how we can bring brands and partners together in a very coherent way. So why do we think like that? We think like that because our master hypothesis is this. We call it unnatural selection. We believe that all businesses will become technology businesses. Technology businesses are networks of value. It's a network versus a network. It's not one company versus another. It will not come from competing entities or individuals, but from competing ecosystems. So when you work with government and you work with large brands, looking at their global strategy, how they're going to roll out something big or explore something, it's about understanding the entire market, the entire system, and how you can change the system. By the way, anyone who's interested in design thinking, it's amazing and all of that, but we're not interested in design thinking. It's actually not good enough to do what we do. We think, we use something called systems thinking because we work at a number of players trying to understand how they all come together. As soon as these ecosystems are built, they will have to be rebuilt. Future ecosystems are distributed, decentralized, and autonomous. That's kind of our hypothesis. This is where we think the world is going to end up eventually. We will feel them, but we won't see them, as ultimately they will be biomechanical in nature. So we work a lot. We're starting to experiment with transhumanism. And the idea of transhumanism is how can you upgrade the human body? How can you upgrade your body? With chips, with implants, with all sorts of things. So in order to do this type of work, we are fundamentally interested in the best of the best. It might sound a little bit self-congratulatory, but everyone that we work with, they have to be at the top of their game. We call them the 1%ers. They cannot be average. Simply because the time pressure that we have, the way that we work, and the kind of work that we do, it means that you have to work with really, really strong people. So hopefully this video will work. Last night it didn't. But this is a little bit of a glimpse of how we work when we bring teams together. How do we want to live in the future?
We're all going to be working towards one goal, to make Dubai the happiest city on earth.
We're here to create and co-create. It's full of anticipation. It's full of fear. It's full of uncertainty and it's full of doubt. We don't know what the end will be. But that's why we have. We had lots of ideas. How can we separate those ideas from each other and pick the good ones and pick the implementable ones? We are preparing to build. We brought some electronics with us. We're missing a few bits. We'll try and do the best we can with what we have. This is the time when we have to rely on each other to get through the hard bits and actually make it. This is how masters work.
Oh yeah.
Introducing Dubai. This is a virtual mall.
This is amazing.
I love it.
You see this as the idea of a home.
It was amazing. Thank you. So it's thanks to all the people that we had in that team. So we had 19 different nationalities working on that. We had Russians, we had Americans, we had Arabs, we had Swedish, we had all sorts of people working together in a really flat hierarchy in a very neutral way, but it's high intensity work. We believe that in order to solve the kinds of problems that we're looking at, and this is kind of like a fun example, we're looking at the traveler experience and making it better, but some of the stuff that we work on is everything from cybersecurity on one end, all the way down to the future of education and the future of work in an entire country. And in order to do that, we handpick the people for the teams. So each of these teams, every person who's in it, is handpicked for that particular role. We interview them, we test them, we check them, and we make sure that they're right for the task. The other big principle that we use is the idea of speed is good. So we work incredibly fast, and when you work fast, basically means you weed out anything that's unnecessary. You're not wasting time in meetings deciding what the next thing is going to be. When you're doing a review in our hacks or in our kind of process, it's pretty much within minutes the decisions are made. Everything is designed to be so fast. And the reason for that is that the cost of failure is cheaper than the cost of analysis. When you're working this fast, you can actually get to results a lot quicker, and most importantly, you learn quicker, which in itself is incredibly valuable. We don't believe that we start with the user. This is why design thinking doesn't necessarily work for us. But we believe in starting with the technology, because quite a lot of the projects that we're looking at are future-facing, they're 5 years ahead or whatever. So has anyone in here heard of something called quantum computing, for example? Okay, 2 people. Something like that. The experiments that we do in quantum computing now, it's a little bit early days, but if that comes through, it's going to radically change the landscape of how we process things and the kinds of services that we make. So for that, there's no point in me going out to somebody outside industry and say, what do you think of quantum computing? Do you like it? Would you like to have a machine that has quantum computing in it? And I'll put an Intel Inside kind of thing. That doesn't work. You have to work at the early stages to develop this IP and these processes and these scenarios. So I'm conscious of time, and we have a lot of other stuff that we can talk about, and Ina and I are here. But the purpose of this talk is to kind of give you an idea how we think about these high-performance teams. So when I set up the company with Ina, before setting up the company, I basically looked throughout my career at all of the things that didn't work, and I turned them upside down. Said, okay, that doesn't work. Meetings don't work. Reviews don't work. That sort of stuff doesn't work. Can I turn it upside down? But also, I looked at high-performance teams in different industries. The last place I was going to look at was the advertising industry. Don't get me wrong. I grew up in the advertising and the technology industries. So I have nothing against them. But if you were to try and do something new and radical, you need to kind of look at what are the external factors, who are the high-performance teams in the world, how do they operate. And these are some of the lessons that we've learned, and we distill them into this manifesto, if you like, for how our performance teams work. So we believe that groupthink is your biggest enemy. Compromise is the worst possible thing you can do. If you're trying to create something cutting edge, you have to be an extremist. You have to be right at the cutting edge. You have to do something. We chipped one of our clients. Ina, where is she? She's over there. One of her projects, we ended up changing the law in the UAE in order to make the proposition and the product come to life. So it became a big campaign, and we ended up kind of working with the ministers there to change the law. We believe that diversity trumps ability. It's not enough to have one really good person. You need to have many good people working together. The sum, the total is bigger than the sum of the parts. It's better to begin with doubt. Quite a lot of people walk into something thinking, I know what the idea is. One of the types of teams that I analyzed were academics who train security analysts. And what they say is that what they found, the profile of the top performers in the analysis and the kind of the forecasting world tend to have no ego. They would be amazing geniuses, but they have zero ego because they realize that they're their own worst enemy when they're making these kind of predictions and tools. A hack team is a suspended hierarchy. There's only one semi-boss in a hack team, and that's the hackmaster, because their job is to facilitate the process rather than kind of stop it. Everybody in the team has a contribution, and we have deadlines, and we have to work within these deadlines. And when I say deadlines, we're talking about 1 hour deadlines, 2 hour deadlines in order to kind of complete a task. We are interested in surprises that provoke the change. The change should be, the surprise should be the rule, not the exception. So unless it's surprising, unless it's scary, we don't do it. It's not worth it. Speed is good. The only thing we don't have is time. simply put, no matter how advanced we are, no matter how well educated we are, no matter how well we learn and study, technology will always be one step ahead of us. So we are in a permanent state of catch-up. We're trying to catch up. So we have to work faster. We believe 10x is better than 1x. Most people kind of make marginal improvements to current products or ideas, but you really have to aim high, and this idea of extremism is actually quite important. What is the ultimate extreme scenario that you can go for? Those of you who participated in our workshop yesterday might remember some of that stuff. Some of the tools we use are about creating constraints and extremes and working backwards from them. You know you're getting it right when the team is moving faster than the fear of failure. You know, we've all been there one stage or another. You know you've got something and people are working late and there is energy and there is passion and there is momentum and they're not scared of failing. The time you spend in your pre-mortem, post-mortem will save you disproportionate time in action. So we also trained, I personally trained with a group of people who specialize in kind of high impact missions, that's all I'm going to say. But essentially the way that they work is they do something called a pre-mortem. Even before they begin, they analyze all of the things that could go wrong and they would have a plan for it. Because in their case, they don't have time, they don't have enough food and water, and they have to fulfill a task that's usually quite difficult. Our attitude to failure and success is exactly the same, indifference. This is not something that we do particularly in our company, but if we win, it's okay, we won. If we failed, it's okay, we failed. And the reason for that is the moment you start celebrating success too much, you become your own worst enemy. You become overconfident, and the next time round, there will be compromise. You have to be fiercely independent intellectually, test reality with extreme agility, but be prepared to hunt together. So what we don't look for is people who give each other group hugs. For us, or compromises, that's not how we work. It's actually quite a robust culture, it's quite a confrontational culture. But the value of the confrontation is that within the tension is a great deal of creativity. So I'm going to stop there because I think I've run out of time, but Ina and I are here and we're happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. So, questions, вопросы, ребята, есть какие-либо? So.
Thank you. What is your main rule on a brainstorm? Is it any one simple or two simple rules that should be done when you are brainstorming for 1 hour, for example?
Rules for brainstorming. Okay. You read the book that said brainstorming doesn't work, right? There is a book that says brainstorming doesn't work. So for us, it's not so much as, hey, let's come up with some ideas. Before we even get to the ideas, we work. This is another thing I learned from the security analysts, is that it's not so much as the prediction of what's going to happen next or whether a terrorist will strike here or there. What they're really good at is getting to a really good question first. So they spend a lot more time, we spend a lot more time getting to a really good question, a really sharp, what we call a master question. If you have a good master question, then the ideas will be a lot more sharper and focused. So part of the challenge, in a previous life I used to be a strategist, and when you're doing strategy you usually have about 15 minutes to come up with a brief or something like that. But realistically for this kind of thing, even though you might have a small amount of time, you still have to get to a good question, and that's vital. And we actually have a tool that I can show you later specifically around what a good question looks like. And because that's important. If you have a good question, you can go. The second thing is when you are in a group situation and you have a good question, you have a good starting point, two things that need to happen before you enter the room. In our process, we have something called the data stage. And the data stage is about understanding the state of the art. What is the latest, best thing available in the world today? Who has pushed the boundaries? Who has pushed the extremes? What does that look like? And only when we know that, then we start kind of working together to try and find that solution. Because otherwise, you will be just repeating or coming up with ideas that other people have already come up with. So that's the second thing. Third thing is, don't ask people to talk to each other. Get them at the first part of the brainstorm to write their ideas silently, independently of each other. So get them to write the idea down on a piece of paper, ideally A5 by the way, this is my idea, before talking to each other. And once you've done that, then you share, and then you build. It becomes like a layering exercise. You start building it in order to kind of get better ideas. So these three things: get the question right, do your data, and don't jump straight into it. Make sure that you distill, because some people are really quiet. The reason why I'm doing the talking, because Ina is generally the quiet person, but she's 10 times more creative and 10 times more strategic than I am. So with somebody like Ina, you have to make sure that you hear what she has, what's in her mind first, before you write anything down. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Можно на русском задать вопрос? Просто с английским могут быть некие проблемы. Вы говорите о том, что вы используете анализ, стратегию по планированию, чтобы не отставать от технологий. Вопрос, где вы берете информацию? Из открытых источников, или у вас есть внутри специалисты, которым вы 100% доверяете, и они проводят какие-то свои внутренние независимые исследования? Или вы отправляете своих людей на какие-то научные конференции, в какие-то закрытые? Вот где вы берете информацию для того, чтобы строить стратегию?
Okay. You told that you use different analytics and strategies and data sources to build your strategies. So where do you get the information to build these strategies? You use open sources, or you use the information from some conferences, investigations? So the basic question is, how do you get the information for building these strategies?
Okay, so I think there's two answers to that. The first one is, usually it depends on the project. So when we did a project around designing an airport and what the new airport experience is going to be like, we looked at architecture, we looked at aviation technologies, we looked at the designers of previous airports, and passengers and all of that stuff that you would imagine you do. So it kind of depends where the domain is. But generally speaking, I would say what we look for is we don't do conferences. I mean, we're doing this, but don't get me wrong. This is a different kind of objective. We actually look at emerging IP at universities. So whenever we're trying to, because the clients that come to us are asking us, what should we build now that's going to be popular in 5 years or 10 years? And when you're working at that level, you know, there is no point in designing an app for somebody, because that's going to be dead within 6 months anyway. You have to kind of work backwards from what the latest stuff is. And the latest stuff tends to be cutting-edge studios that are working on new things, tends to be university researchers. So we have a huge university network. We have about 15 different universities. We teach in about 12 different universities every year. So we have really strong contacts with the universities, technology departments, technology systems and whatnot, so that we can see what the new IP is going to look like. And it's usually very incomplete. It's not done yet. You know, it's like half the story. So that's when we go. Because by the time you see it in a conference, by the time you read about it online, it would have been through several rounds of somebody else took a shot at it. Somebody else had a chance to see it. So we try and work backwards. So that would be an interesting kind of source. The second part is methodology. We have, I can't go through it right now, but we have 15 different dimensions to analyze whether this technology or this trend even is worth it or not. And this is one of the things that we're trying to automate so that it happens automatically. So for example, we look at the level of maturity of the technology. We look at the level of maturity of the market in which that technology exists. And once we understand that, then we give them scores. Okay, this is going to happen, this is not going to happen. So quite a lot of the stuff that I learned about from the analysts, from the scientific guys that are working on this stuff, was how you put risk factors. But we reversed it. We put how likely factors. Is this going to happen or is it not going to happen?
Okay, thank you very much, Захер. Thank you.
Thank you.